to open our panel, hopefully on the screen.
Is this working? I'm going to assume that you can hear me. No one should ever assume that, right? I'm talking to, I can't see you. Oh, we can hear you. Okay. Yes. Sorry. Christy's texting me at the same time. I can't see you. So I'm going to start. But I just want to acknowledge that I'm actually on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, which means that I'm in Sydney, and I want to pay my respects to elders past and present. And I also acknowledge that those who are in the room today and the in-person event is on the lands of it's not on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, it's on the lands of the Yalukit Willen clan of the Bunurong people at the Victorian Pride Centre. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and all the people who are listening and all the different countries that you are from, and acknowledge Rainbow Mob and any First Nations people that might be listening today. Of course, in Victoria, we have Australia's first treaty, and that's something that we all need to fight for and protect. So I'd like to welcome people to today's event, and those both online and those at the Victorian Pride Centre, and start by saying Happy Disability Pride Month. And I'm glad that we could do this event today, and I'm excited about how much interest there has been for us to do this event. And given the interest, I think that we will pursue other lunch and learn type events. And please do provide your feedback on this event so we can consider future events. You know, it's so important that we all acknowledge Disability Pride Month. I mean, for me, it's important to recognise Disability Pride Month and the legacy of disability activists and what they have given us, not in only making the places that we inhabit far more accessible, but also in the legacy of nothing about us without us. Of course, that slogan comes from the Disability Pride movement and has shaped how many of us do peer work, do engagement and consultations, and how we centre those who are most impacted, and how we don't just do things for people, that we actually include people directly in the conversations, and that people have access to topic. And one of the things I was thinking about was historically LGBTIQA+ communities, particularly prior to decriminalisation of homosexuality. A lot of our events were held in pubs and clubs, highly inaccessible events. Often they were held in pubs and clubs, and that were also some run down, often in back rooms, illegal, and you know, like the story of Stonewall, which started our first modern LGBTIQA+ pride movement. You know, Stonewall was a very dishevelled, run by mafia club in New York that often had high fire risks and was very inaccessible. But I think it typified how a community used to gather and who could gather during those times, both for legality reasons, but also for access. Meanwhile, the history of people with disability is the gathering options were usually highly institutionalised. People were gathered or found each other in highly institutional spaces, including in hospitals and other pathologising parts of the medical industry. Neither places for our communities were about belonging, acceptance, or accessibility. Both created barriers to access, and both failed to build the belonging that people so desperately sought. And at the intersections of being someone with a disability and being LGBTIQA+, to access the LGBTIQA+ community was for many just completely out of reach. However, people did incredible things to break those barriers down over the years. Of course, fighting for decriminalisation, but then which people with disabilities have always been part of our movement and leading, and many in leadership and prominent roles. And also, but however, even though much progress has been made, I know from hearing from members of the community, there is so much more to do. And one of those huge areas is events. And that's what we're doing today, is that Pride events today, and some of the most iconic ones, of course, like the marches, the festivals, it is still a challenge, although Midsummer did incredible work this year and Chill Out did too, but there is still more work to be done to make these events. And I want to applaud those who have made those events more accessible, and that we keep pushing in those spaces. People doing things like organising the bus, like Accessible Pride, who organised the bus to Chill Out, and also provided things like seating arrangements, hearing loops, and an accessible disability hub as part of the overall Chill Out hub. These things are really important. I'm sure they'll be discussed more. I don't want to take away from what other people are going to raise as important decisions, but I just want to say work has been done. However, we need to do far more, and we need to also make it the not the optional extra if there's enough funding, but the inherent that you can't run an event unless these things are achieved, that they are the event, and normalise that. So without any further ado, I do want to just acknowledge those who are providing the expertise today: Inclusive Rainbow Voices, Accessible Pride Project, and Thorn Harbour Health. I also want to acknowledge the Victorian Pride Centre for hosting the event, both the technology and the in-person event. And with that, without any further ado, I want to hand over to Jess Cadwalder, pronouns she, they, and introduce Jess. Jess is a non-binary queer person with disability and a passionate advocate of disability justice. Currently, they are the CEO of Inclusive Rainbow Voices. Hi, Jess. I wish I could sort of look at you and say hi, but I'm going to just assume you were there, and that was you speaking before. Currently, Jess is the CEO of Inclusive Rainbow Voices, an organisation working for justice for all LGBTIQA+ people with a disability. Jess's work history spans research, advocacy, policy development, and systems change with a focus on preventing and responding to violence, especially against people experiencing intersectional marginalisation. They believe in the power of community to transform individual lives and the very world we live in, and they seek to work with others to sustain the many varied and wonderful communities of LGBTIQA+ people with disability. And with great honour and respect, I now hand over to you, Jess. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Thanks so much, Joe, and welcome, everyone. I'd like to also add my acknowledgement of this glorious country, and also the country that I currently call home, which has been lovingly and beautifully cared for by the Wadawurrung people for such a long time. I stand in solidarity with the Wadawurrung and all First Nations people and echo their calls for justice. Before we get started, I've got a few housekeeping notes, so I'm going to zip through these because they're not super relevant to the people who are online, so forgive me if I do them at speed. The Pride Centre has an accessible toilet with personal automated hoist on the ground floor and mezzanine floor. All toilet facilities are all gender. All floors are accessible by elevators positioned by the stairs with voice descriptions and slow closing doors. Assistance animals are very welcome at the Pride Centre. There is a hearing loop installed in this room. So if you need access to that, you should be able to access it now. Auslan interpreters are here with us. And thank you to Sarah and Damon for their work here today. One will be in the audience for a panel member, the wonderful Stuart, and another on the stage, both for recording and for anyone in the audience who needs interpretation. Live captioning will be displayed. Oh good, it's at the top so you can see it behind us. That's a good thing. A quiet, low sensory space is available on level 1. Please approach a staff member so you can be shown to the room if you'd like to use that. We have someone monitoring the chat online for those who are joining us online, so please use the chat to communicate with us if you need anything. And please, everybody, take breaks as you need them. So I want to welcome you all to this Lunch and Learn. No one's eating, which seems to downplay the whole lunch aspect, but there is food available out the back if you would like to grab some. It's called From Access to Belonging, LGBTIQA+ People and Events. We, myself, our wonderful presenters, the Commissioner and Christy Yates, the Commissioner's Principal Advisor, have worked together to create an event designed to help us all think about what it takes to create belonging for LGBTIQA+ people with disability through events. I'm going to read the bios for our panels, first of all, just to whet your appetite, and then I'll do a little more framing of the conversation that we're going to have. So Stuart Anderson, he, him, is a deaf gay man, a community leader and accessibility advocate. He is a co-founder of Deaf Queer Australia and actively involved in organising and supporting deaf LGBTIQA+ initiatives, including the Deaf Queer Festival. As team leader program design at Deaf Connect, Stuart works to improve accessibility and inclusion through community-informed approaches. He brings lived and professional expertise to conversations about belonging, communication, access, and ensuring people with disability can fully participate in their communities of choice. And that term, communities of choice, will come up a few times in the conversation today. Welcome, Stuart. Next, we're all out of order, just to mix it up. So I'm going to the spectacularly yellow figure on the stage. Matthew Parsons, they, them, is a consultant, researcher, educator and systems change leader with over 20 years experience across LGBTIQA+ inclusion, disability, health promotion, violence prevention and community development. Currently they are the manager of Accessible Pride at Thorn Harbour Health, a world first improving outcomes for LGBTQ people with intellectual disability. Matthew's work focuses on translating the experiences of those at the margins of the margins into systemic change, with an emphasis on cultural safety, co-design and co-delivery, supported decision-making and trauma or healing-informed practice. They have contributed to national initiatives, including the Rainbow Tick Standards Guides, writing themselves in for Pride in Prevention, Our Rainbow Lives, the Royal Commission into Family Violence, and the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability. They deliver inclusion training and creative projects, including an educational theatre piece that helped bring national attention to LGBTQ intimate partner violence. Welcome to Matthew. Next to Matt is Jack Richardson. I have to thank Jack for stepping in at the last minute when another speaker was unable to make it. So thank you, Jack, for stepping up. Jack Richardson, he, him, is the intersectional lived experience expert at Accessible Pride. He is also working on the Pass It To Me project, which is focused on people with intellectual disability participating in sports, because Jack is a sports nut. Jack is engaged to his fiancée Cameron, who proposed at the Sydney Opera House, very romantic, and they have a dog named Rocket. Jack likes working on Accessible Pride so that other LGBTIQA+ people with intellectual disability get to live the lives they want to live, like Jack does. Welcome, Jack. Meredith Johnson, just here to my left, she, her, has served as committee member and treasurer of Chill Out for 6 years and volunteered for many years before that. Chill Out runs an annual queer community festival during the March long weekend in Daylesford. Meredith worked on accessibility for Chill Out 2026 and is looking forward to continuing this work to make the 2027 festival even more accessible. Meredith is a graduate of the 2024 Victorian LGBTIQA+ Leadership Program and also works to support organisations to achieve Rainbow Tick accreditation. A proud cis lesbian and mother to a straight cis daughter, Meredith is passionate about helping LGBTIQA+ communities and allies feel safe and connected. Okay, now you get to listen to me for a little while. Hold forth about this topic before we delve into a few specific aspects. LGBTIQA+ people with disability can sometimes struggle to find community that we can be fully ourselves in. In too many spaces, we're forced to show up as disabled or as queer, as deaf or as trans, as chronically ill or intersex. Our whole selves are rarely made space for. The fragmentation that we experience as a result, never feeling fully included or fully represented, can have some pretty serious impacts. There's limited research specifically into LGBTIQA+ people with disability. It's getting better, but it's just not there yet. But what there is suggests that we experience even higher levels of psychological distress than other people with disability, or than LGBTIQA+ people who are not disabled, and experience more of the poor outcomes that are associated with isolation, including higher rates of violence and abuse. We are getting more evidence now that disability is overrepresented amongst LGBTIQA+ people. I don't think this is something that we've really come to grips with as the LGBTIQA+ community. And this means that increasing access not only increases the number of LGBTIQA+ people with disability who can come to events, it also means that those who already come but maybe struggle to engage or to stay for very long might also be supported by increasing accessibility. Sometimes our capacity to access the communities we want to can be hindered by service providers who don't understand LGBTIQA+ lives. I'm thinking particularly of disability service providers here, by plan managers who don't see the importance of being able to connect with other LGBTIQA+ people, or by event producers or coordinators who haven't built in accessibility from the get-go. And I suppose I wanted to frame it that way because there are reforms currently under consideration to the NDIS that are likely to seriously impact the capacity of individual people with disability to compensate for the inaccessibility of particular events. And so it's really important that that those events are starting to think more seriously about access, because there won't be that individualised support as readily available. But I know that's why you're all here, to have this conversation about access, to think more about accessibility specifically for LGBTIQA+ people with disability. I want you to understand as we work through our exceptional panel of speakers and answer your questions that it matters that you're here and thinking with us about access for us. I also want you to remember that LGBTIQA+ people with disability are a many and varied lot. It's not just the alphabet soup of LGBTIQA, which in itself includes many different experiences of the world before we even add a plus to the end, nor is it only that disability clumps together a wide array of differences, all with their own specific needs. It's also that our communities are diverse and multifaceted, intersectional and complex. We cannot represent all of those experiences here today, of course, in a limited panel context. So the message you'll hear a lot today is that it's vital to engage with your community and to work out what their access needs are. While some people find that very diversity intimidating, I'm sure we've all been in rooms where someone has said, well, if we can't make it accessible for everyone, should we even be trying? What's important to know is that every increase in access matters and enables another disabled person to be included, and to know that they are seen as whole people, not just as one part of them. But none of this in the end is about checklists for access. It's kind of tempting to reduce access to those kinds of checklists, I think. Accessibility is the foundation, but what we're really building is belonging, is a community. Yes, accessibility is a baseline so that LGBTIQA+ people with disability can actually attend an event, but this is to enable connection with others. In other words, accessibility can happen without full inclusion, and that's not what any of us are aiming for. So while we're listening to our incredible speakers today, I'd like us to think not just about the to-do lists that we can create around access, which are key, but what it really takes to build connection and to build community. I'll be back at the end with a couple of thoughts about that, but right now I'd like to hand the mic over to someone else, actually to a double act. Matt and Jack, you've been working together on Accessible Pride for a while now. Can you run us through what the project is doing and what impacts you are seeing it have?
Yes, thanks. I am terrible at keeping to time, so I'm going to read off notes to ensure that I don't take up all the time of the other fabulous panelists. So, Accessible Pride is a world-first project focused on improving the lives of LGBTQ people with intellectual disability. It's a partnership between Thorn Harbour Health, Inclusion Melbourne, and the Australian Research Centre in Sex, Health and Society at La Trobe University. So even from the foundation of setting it up, we recognized that we needed expertise from those two different spaces brought together, and because there's so little research and evidence and examples of good interventions in this space, that we needed to work in a model that was evidence-building as well as evidence-based. So at the heart of the project is a gap between two systems. Disability services rarely understand LGBTQ identities, relationships, and experiences, while LGBTIQA+ organizations and events do not understand intellectual disability or know how to provide accessible support. So people therefore fall between two communities that should both be theirs and where they should feel they belong. Community of choice events matter because they are not merely entertainment. They are where people explore identity, meet friends and partners, find role models, and build belonging. We distinguish between three things. Access, first. Can somebody get through the gate? Inclusion. Can they understand what is happening and participate meaningfully? And belonging. Do they feel accepted and valued? And even better, do they get to help shape what happens next? So Jack is here as my Accessible Pride colleague and a knowledge holder, not simply someone who has received support. His title is Intersectional Lived Experience Expert, and that's deliberate because his expertise carries the same standing and power as any other subject matter expert. So Jack, do you want to tell people a little bit about what you do in your role at Accessible Pride?
Yeah, for sure. So what I do for Accessible Pride is that I help Praying Easy English. So I sort of help people with disabilities to make it better for people understanding of what I translate easy English to make it better for people with intellectual disabilities. So I make it better for other people to understand what barriers that need to be fixed and what is accessible for people with an intellectual disability to be a part of an event.
And you also chair our meetings?
Yes, I do.
You guys say it in the mic.
I chair meetings for researchers, so for co-designs, to help people sort of what ideas that they want, and to make the project a bit better.
And you also have final sign-off.
Yes, so I have the final sign-off. So at the end of the day, it will go to me, and what I would say, if it's good, it will go through. If it's not, then we'll have to do a redo and go from back to scratch, where I have to send it off to someone and say that's not good. So it'll make it better. It will come back to me, and I'll send it off saying it's good to go, and it will go from there, and we go move on to the next subject, translation.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so we deliberately, Jack has final sign-off on any easy language materials because Jack's an actual consumer of easy language materials, so I've had the chance to build that bank of experience. So we start from a baseline of no assumptions. That is a relational approach to disability, and instead of asking what is wrong with this person, we ask what limitations have been placed on your life, and what can we change about the information, environment, systems, and relationships around you so you have equitable access to the rich experiences you deserve. So we tested this approach at Chill Out Festival in Daylesford last year. For some people, Daylesford was not just difficult to reach, but organizing the trip independently would have been categorically impossible. And most had never attended a large LGBTIQ event and did not know what to expect. So one of the first things we did was develop an easy language information set and some targeted outreach. We also organized a supported party bus from Melbourne, hosted by an amazing drag queen, Miss Bobby Pinn. For some people, that was the difference between attending and not attending at all. The NDIS is incredibly complex and does not see community events as nearly as vital as we do. So for months beforehand and throughout the festival, my right-hand queer, Tani, in the audience, and I worked as the accessibility coordinators. We trained green-vested volunteers who provided that visible support at all Chill Out hosted events. At busier events, there were chill zones and green access lanyards let people enter early in order to orient around the space before crowds built up, and also to signal to any volunteers that they should have the priority access to the priority seating areas. We taught volunteers what likely support needs different types of disability would require, how to offer that help before somebody had to ask, but also how to listen and when to escalate. So Jack, what was it like? You've been to the festival twice. You and I went because you were already an employee of Accessible Pride the first year. So we went as a kind of a test with no supports to see what it was like. And then you came back the second year with all the accessibility. So what were some of the differences in your experience from year 1 to year 2?
The first time I went there, I sort of wasn't, expecting, I didn't expect what was, if I'd felt included, because I felt like this is my first time going to a Cheer Up festival. So the first time I went to a Cheer Up festival, I felt, I was a bit nervous because I thought I was not going to be included. But once I went there, I felt more included. I got to see what was there, got to see many sort of, I'll say, sort of like a drag shows, but also I got to saw like a country cowboy sort of dancing, the bush dance, so that was really, really fun. Then... Do
you remember what happened at the burlesque show?
Burlesque, oh... Yeah, I do, vaguely, very vaguely.
Let me share the mic. So what I remember is that you picked out that you wanted to go to the burlesque show, and then we were like 10 minutes into the show, and you turned to me and said, "So is this what happens? They just get up in costumes and sing and take off their clothes?" And I suddenly realized that when you picked the burlesque show, you hadn't ever been to a burlesque thing before, so you didn't even know what it was. So I had to make an easy language explanation on the fly and go, yes, it is about taking off their clothes, but there's like this contract with the audience. We have to scream more, and the more they scream, the more we scream, the more clothes they take off. And then once you understood how the game kind of worked, then you were able to really participate. So that was even a lesson for me, that I made assumptions that when you picked that out of the program, that you knew what it was.
Yeah, I do think, like, I feel like it made a big difference, because I feel like it made it more, if someone explained it a bit more, like, easy language, then I would probably understand, like, oh, okay, that's what it actually does. But the second time now, I think now we got, easy language program. It's better for people to sort of like plan what events they want to go. And we sort of guide like some guidelines where if someone has if it's loud noises, if it affects loud noises to you, don't go. we'll just give like a little point out reminders to make sure that everyone will be included, or if no one wants to go to that, they can go to other events. So the second time it's been better, and we improved a lot over since then. So I'm hoping we can improve more for people with disabilities.
Thanks, Jack. So, yeah, I mean, basically you went from 1 year not knowing what it was, you went to the next year with a lot more information, and you had the accessible program, so you guys picked out what you wanted to do, and buying the tickets was really hard the first time. I did all of that for you the first time, but the second time we had a policy that we worked out with Chill Out that if people were on a disability pension, they just got free tickets to the festival. And that was really important because there were some people that I supported in the lead up to it that said things like, I'm coming up, I've wanted to come up for 29 years, you'll see this person in the video, and I can afford 3 days because I have to buy all the tickets for myself and my support worker. And I said, no, your tickets are free. Oh my God, I can afford 4 days. So, you know, that thinking about that is really important. Event producers often assume punters know what to expect, but people with intellectual disability are far more likely to have been gatekept from similar opportunities. So the difference for Jack now is you're going next year, you've already reserved your caravan camping spot, and I think that's it right there. That's what we're aiming for. That's belonging. That's feeling like the event thinks about you, knows you're coming, provides you the welcome mat that says you belong here. I'm going to skip forward a little bit and just recognize that transport remained a major barrier, and that's why we organized the party bus to Chill Out. But we had some unhappy accidents. The actual wheelchair accessible bus broke down in the middle of the festival. So thankfully, because Tani and I were, you know, the access coordinators, I ended up on the phone to the one and only disability accessible taxi in Daylesford and coordinating it between, well, this person needs to get picked up from this place to that place, and then this person needs this place. So that was a fun on-the-fly contingency response. So be ready for that, be ready for things that you haven't expected, and be prepared to be able to be adaptive in the moment. One of our most important learnings, though, was something, again, that we hadn't planned for. In fact, something we didn't know we needed to plan for. We recruited from Chill Out's existing volunteer pool without considering that almost all those volunteers might have disability access needs themselves. In hindsight, it makes complete sense. People who've experienced inaccessible events know how excluding they can be, so they're far more likely to be the people who put up their hands to make the next one better. This gave us an extraordinary pool of lived experience knowledge within our accessible volunteer pool, but our strategy between Tani and I had to pivot quickly and start to operate at 2 levels. We had to make the volunteer experience disability inclusive so that the volunteers could make the punter experience more inclusive. The people making access possible also needed access. Because we'd not planned far enough ahead, Tani and I had to do far more on-the-spot adaptation than would have otherwise been necessary. So that's the thing I would really want people to take away, this hard-learned lesson. I think you should expect this and plan for it and welcome it with open arms. It actually became quite a good opportunity for us. After the festival, the volunteers helped identify the next steps. So rather than Accessible Pride running the intervention again this next year, it was the volunteer pool themselves that suggested an early accessibility working group should be established. So we've connected all of those volunteers to the Chill Out committee, and support structures are now being established so those people can lead the improvements next year. I wish I could say I was clever enough to have made that in our original plan, but I'm not. But it is now our model. Build shared capacity, then deliberately transfer power and ownership and leadership to the people with lived experience. That moves us from access to participation to belonging, and finally to empowered leadership. So don't get me wrong, one pilot has not solved systemic exclusion, but it showed that practical whole system, co-designed with people with disability, then increasingly led by them, where shift assumptions and systems make participation difficult, and how can people with disability help us rebuild them? So Jack, what would be one thing that you would like event organizers to remember about including LGBTQ people with intellectual disability?
Like more of a voice in a way, I think, get them involved, because I think that if they don't get involved, it's pretty much not including the values of people who want to be a part of, you know, some of the organizations, and get them to sort of...
And what does it mean to be able to attend events like this?
It means a lot. Attending means pretty much letting the people with an intellectual disability to be included in the intellectual disability, to be a part of organization, but also remembering all the things that the events they've gone to, and see what leads up to more improvement that the organizations need to, get improved and make people feel
like they belong.
Feel belong and welcomed.
Yeah. So we're at the third year of our project, and so we're in write-up phase. What's happening now is all of that learning that we've done is being written up into a whole suite of resources. We'll be launching that in April back here at VPC. So stay tuned, sign up to our newsletter, and you'll get that and a whole bunch of other information. We're a whole suite of resources, but I'll stop there and pass back. And happy to speak to people at the end about more about what we're doing.
Thank you both for your discussion. I think Accessible Pride really demonstrates the importance of inclusion, the way that it can make people feel welcome. I'm actually going to pass back to Matt for just a second to introduce the video that we're now going to watch, which is about the Chill Out experience. So I'll just pass back to Matt.
This is basically my Julia Child moment where I'm like, here's one I prepared earlier. So thankfully, I hired a couple of videographers to come up to chill out with us as well and document what we were doing. Thankfully, one of those was available to quickly put together a gorgeous video for us that you get to hear from some of the people themselves about what that experience was like, also some of our volunteers.
First type. I want to come back for 30th anniversary next year.
First time chill out, first time at any LGBTI festival, really, just loving it.
29 years.
What's happened for 29 years?
I wanted to come. I did come for one day, but that wasn't enough.
Like, love the atmosphere, loving how inclusive this place is, and just like being on the bus and like with Miss Bobby Pin and like playing those games. It's just been fun.
I've never been here before, so it's my first time here. So I came here and I loved it.
I love just the inclusion and the diversity, but then when there was a call out for accessibility volunteers, I immediately jumped on that because that's something I'm super passionate about, and it combines all the things I love, which is access, inclusion, pride, chill out, hanging out with people. The volunteers are amazing, everyone who attends are amazing, and this means more people can come.
It needs a year to organise.
So it's good to have a lot of support here today, and it's helping me get through the day, which is really awesome.
this has just made such a difference, having the accessibility volunteers and being visible in the green and with the green chill area.
Sometimes people, especially like me, have anxiety, which I'm not quite used to crowds, and I get a bit anxious and a bit nervous.
We could assist people with mobility aids and wheelchair users to priority seating. We could assist people who needed some downtime because of sensory overload, including like children through to older members of our community, and it's been such a beautiful thing to be part of.
The chill out zones have been amazing, not just for queers with a disability, but I think that they've been good for so many other folk, and I think that access, it just shows that access is good for everyone, not just for people with disability.
I love how like they had the idea of like the bus up here, because like certain people, me included, would never be able to get to this otherwise. But like even having like the chill out zones and like people walking around in the vests, so you can ask questions. Like I feel like that doesn't get represented enough at like events.
It's been so incredible to be at such an inclusive festival. Seeing their community here and seeing all the different ways that people are expressing their identity and sexuality and gender, then begin to have conversations with me that they've never had before about what journey they might want to go on in expressing their own gender and identity. And I've worked with queers with an intellectual disability for a long time and haven't seen anything like this before.
Well, when I first came out, I blocked it for years and years and years, and my family was having a big arguments and everything else, and I couldn't block it no longer, and it all came out nice as shit.
Well, I've kind of always eyes closed, and I've always thought, oh, I don't feel like a girl. I've always noticed that when I've been around, they would be talking about boys, and I'm like, not my kind of thing.
It was quite a few years ago when I got into being gay and that, and I was set upon by someone on a bus that called me not a nice name, I don't like repeating it.
And in 1986, there wasn't much in the disability community. And since I come out, it's improved, but there needs to be a lot more. It needs to be more structured, more recognition in the LGBT community for disabled people, especially for young people. The next generation of disability queer community needs more support.
You just need to know that we're normal like any other person in the community. We're normal. We're not stupid. We're normal.
Don't be afraid of who you are. Be who you are and stay happy. And if anyone doesn't like LGBTQI plus people, they can not participate and just let us live our lives and what we love.
Because to be seen and to be heard and to be seen in the LGBT and the disability community.
Honestly, just be true to yourself. Like, I wish I had came out earlier. Like I came out at 25, but like I wish I'd done it earlier, because like I think you're missing out on new experiences if you like hide it in for too long.
I love it. I love very much. Yeah. I love being gay. I love being gay. That's one thing I like about my life. I love how good gay used to be with boys. I love being with boys.
I think that was extremely illustrative of why it is so important that access is considered from the get-go. So now that we've had a little chat about some of the work around Chill Out, and we've watched a video that kind of brought a little bit of Chill Out into the room, we're now going to turn to Meredith. Meredith, you've been central to increasing the accessibility of Chill Out. Can you run us through the experience and what Chill Out has taken away from it?
Thanks, Jess, and thanks, Matt. That actually brought a tear to my eye because I've never seen that video before. And to know that the work that we did has given people that experience. I'm crying again. So obviously from that you can tell that the committee is actually overwhelmed by what we achieved this year, and the fact that we had the opportunity to do it with Matt and his group, and Tani and all our volunteers that were just amazing. I think one of the things that we perhaps didn't understand or never had the time to recognise was how many of our volunteers have a form of disability and how much more we need to do for them in that space as well. To have Greg there, who had wanted to come for 28 years and was able to come this year, was just the most amazing thing, and you know, we were all just ecstatic, and we said, sure, give him free tickets, whatever. Because you know, it is, when you hear that the price of the ticket's going to make a difference between attending and not attending, it doesn't matter to us $50 here or there. You know, at the end of the day, we want, you know, the Chill Out is queer country pride, and it's an, you know, our aim is to be inclusive of everybody, and that includes just our country folk as well as our queer folk, as well as our, you know, the young, the old, those with disabilities and those with not. And so we really try hard to be as inclusive as possible. We do a survey at the end of the year, at the end of the festival, which unfortunately only about 200 or 300 people reply to, even though I send out 15,000. And they, in that, some of the comments that we get back are the fact that people actually feel safer in Daylesford over that long weekend than they do at home through the year, and that breaks our heart. You know, I have the privilege of living in Daylesford and have done for over 20 years. I brought my child up there who went to school in Daylesford and had no thoughts about having two mothers and all of that sort of thing. Went to school in Ballarat in year 7, and suddenly I'm going, how come I've got no kids coming home on the weekend? And finally she admitted, I'm a bit scared, Mum. And just, you know, that degree of homophobia that she'd never experienced before, she felt, she got over it, and, you know, she had a little bit of backlash, you know, with a few people, especially the ones who thought because your mum's gay, then you must be gay. That was always a struggle for her. But, yeah, it's, the township of Daylesford is a very inclusive town. We have our issues still, but we, you know, majority of people support the festival. When we didn't have it one year, they all went, what happened? And we said, well, you didn't support us, so, you know, we can't do this all on our own. So we bring about $8 million into the community over that one weekend, and they all notice it. So they all want to be on board and support it. Yeah, I think the discounting of tickets is something to really take on board if you're doing any sort of thing, to be able to go, if it's going to make an impact on whether that person attends or not, can you do something different on it? We took on board that from discussions that we had with Matt. We took on board the Easy Read program, and thank you very much to Matt and Tani, and also to get that across the line, and that's something that will continue forever. because we just saw how important it was, and I think that burlesque example is classic, and that came up at another thing that I'd done previously before we had the discussion about working with Chill Out, and to sort of go, yeah, okay, not everybody does understand these things, and not everybody understands when we say the lesbian long lunch that actually there's going to be mainly women there, and that there's, when it's thick and juicy, well, it's mainly men there, and you know, there's not a lot of clothing and all of that sort of stuff. So just those simple things can make a big difference to people on how they, not only how they view going to that event, but when they're there, that they're not feeling, oh, nobody told me that. Now I feel uncomfortable because I'm making assumptions from what I'm seeing, but if they'd known, you know, they could go in and feel strong and confident in that space.
And with your permission, I've given the organisers of this all of that material, so they'll email it to everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry, you have to say that on the microphone.
You're going to get a copy of our accessibility easy language program, and yeah, enjoy it. Take from what you can. So we sort of went, how can we identify our accessibility volunteers? And so we did our little green vests, because we had feedback from all our volunteers saying, oh, we don't want to keep getting a t-shirt every year, it's so wasteful, blah, blah, blah. So we're just doing vests now. And we thought, well, we'll do these dark green ones with accessibility on the back. And I need to buy more for next year. And they worked really well. We also had some, you know, green lanyards, because not everybody has a green sunflower lanyard, for example, the hidden disability identifier. Because, you know, the thing that we are all aware of is that not all disabilities are visual. So to be able to give somebody something that they can then walk up to the main gate and go, I need early access, was something that we determined quite early on that we needed to have. So that was another thing that we'll continue with. So we're talking about transport. Now, we love Daylesford. Everybody loves Daylesford. Everyone loves coming to Daylesford. But we are so inaccessible in so many ways. We have pubs that don't have, you know, that have steps. It's like, you know, we have so few accommodation places that will cater for people who need a wheelchair. You know, there is no public transport in Daylesford. There's no option if the bus that we have to pay for to get people around town breaks down, then there are no options unless you have two wonderful angels who sit there and manage the one taxi who's capable of getting people around. So, you know, we have that thing that not a lot of other festivals will have. That's an ongoing issue that we have with transportation, with accommodation. You know, they always put the price, it doubles the price every festival time. You know, we're working hard to get some more camping type places, low cost places for people, to try and make it more accessible for everyone. But lots of things that we took away from this year we'll continue with. We had a lot of experiences that we were so happy to hear the stories of. We had a mother who has a trans child who was, I shouldn't say child, trans young adult, who was performing and has never been able to come to the events that they perform at because of accessibility issues. And Matt's team managed to get them there, and yeah, that's the sort of wonderful thing that we took away from it. Greg coming, you know, and all those other people that I hadn't heard half those stories before, and so it was just really heartwarming and something that, you know, I'll take back to the communities that when they go, oh, do we have to do that? I'll go, yes, we do. So, yeah, you know, we had quite a few wins in 2026, so we're pretty happy and we're really looking forward to, I'm really sorry, but have you booked 10 days of accommodation? Because that's what it is this year. But not all it's party time. So, yeah, so we're looking forward to 30 years of chill out in 2027 with a lot more accessibility. And if anyone knows some good transport people to get people up from Melbourne, from the Bland Station to Dalesford, let me know.
Thanks so much, Meredith. I think it's really interesting to think about how key having people who can engage with people with disability on the ground as part of events, like the difference that makes. It's, you know, we can do all the kind of physical access things, but having people who can engage are really key. I'm turning to Stuart now. In your time as an accessibility volunteer, what are some of the things you've noticed that events sometimes miss the mark on when it comes to the inclusion of deaf people?
Welcome to my world as a deaf person. I can't hear the microphone. So yes, my experience so far, when I saw the Chill Out Festival last year, I went myself. I fell in love with the festival. I thought it was amazing. An amazing opportunity. It was beautiful. A little bit different to Midsummer. Midsummer's great, but for old men like me, can be involved in something. So I thought I really want to offer my volunteer time to be able to support this festival. So I thought, oh, you know what, I'll apply to be a volunteer, send off my application, but it didn't say that I was deaf. So I wanted to see how that went, if I got accepted as a volunteer. And then I was going to be like, oh, by the way, I'm deaf and I need interpreters and things like that. So that kind of threw things off a little bit. So there was a little bit of education involved to show that I can be involved. I've got the experience, I'm the expert, I've got the skills to bring as a volunteer. So please allow me in to do that, to show how that would work. And I was really, really pleased that they all accepted my offer and to show how I can be a volunteer, and I thought it was the best time. You know, it's been months since, and I'm still thinking about what happened at the festival. You know, I'm so excited for next year. You know, it's going to be 10 days. I'm so excited now that I've heard that. And I'm definitely volunteering again for some of the days, because I want to party as well. When I was there volunteering, there was lots of teething issues, areas that we could improve. At the same time, I was allowing the mistakes to happen. That was okay. And the education there was what was important, you know, learning how to fix those little issues on the go. So I've got a few points and examples that I'm going to list off. Not only Chill Out, but many different events. Often plan for accessibility, for funding at the end. It's always an afterthought. It's never at the start. So you need to please think at the same time as organising the event, organising the disability access. So, you know, everybody's applying for funding. Most of the time all that funding gets organised before the disability access, and it's too late. The funding has already run out. So if you start thinking about and planning about disability access before you have that funding there, think about it before, add it into your budget, because it's needed. You know, accessibility is not always free, it does cost money. So that's one point. What was mentioned before, the NDIS? Wonderful. they assume that we have our own NDIS and then that's going to pay for it, but that's not true. When you're organising an event, it is your responsibility, because my money is for my access and my needs. When you're organising an event for the general public, you're organising the access for the general public to come. Not everybody has access to the NDIS, and now, particularly deaf people, but I'm sure other disabled folk as well, funding's starting to get cut and reduced. So we're relying on the organisations, we're relying on you to support us in those environments. So before the NDIS, usually organisations were responsible to gather the funding, and then it became individual, and now the rules are getting changed. And organisations are a little bit, well, it's not my problem, it's your problem. You've got the NDIS. So we're going back to now it's the organisation's responsibility to provide that access. You can organise funding in clever ways and how to spend it. It doesn't mean that you have to calculate it and look at how expensive it is and go, oh, bugger that. There's another way around. For example, I volunteered for Chill Out. I was very lucky. Because I was volunteering, I asked my interpreter friend, oh, if I'm volunteering, can you volunteer as well? So we both volunteered together. Not all interpreters are like that, but sometimes, you know, interpreters have to support themselves, they have to feed themselves, so I understand that. But that meant that I didn't have to touch my NDIS and my funding to get an interpreter. So there's a possibility to go, oh, can we work out how to get volunteers for interpreting? Or, you know, try your best to pick ways to fund it. Like, for example, the stage, you saw the interpreters. But how many other events were going on, not just on the main stage, that didn't have access to interpreters? And then my other point, I'm trying not to get too distracted and off topic, because the interpreter's looking at me and saying, please don't get off topic. So when you're organising an event, please don't assume that there's enough interpreters. You have to book them ahead of time, giving plenty of time to book the interpreters. Because we're still training interpreters. Like at the moment I work for Deaf Connect and we're still teaching interpreters to get qualified. So there's definitely not enough. So then we can provide more training for interpreters to get involved in the community. And then if you're leaving at last minute, you're really struggling to then book the interpreters for what you need. So definitely book your interpreters in advance. So often when you're planning an event, you think about accessibility as a ramp, some lights. There's a lot more than just what's assumed knowledge that equals accessibility. So you need to think about what is accessibility. And there is a big difference between accessibility and inclusion. And inclusion here is the key word. I've seen many organizations who say, oh, we're fully inclusive. And I come in and I go, oh, all right, let me see myself if you're really inclusive you are. 99.9999% of the time they fail. So don't call yourself inclusive if you're not actually providing inclusion. So you have to think twice. You know, get training first. Think before you provide that. Understand what inclusion means and then include that in your planning. So promotion, printed promotion, sometimes isn't always fully accessible. Because when I recently was at Chill Out, I tried to imagine how many deaf were going to go. So I, asked around who's going. And they said, oh, it's a hearing event. It's a hearing thing. It's a hearing thing. And I said, no, I'm there. I'm volunteering there. And they're like, oh, really? Can you volunteer? Yes, I can. I'm currently volunteering for it. So I managed to convince a few deaf people to come. And I asked, why haven't you been in the past? What's the issue? And their response was that they never showed that it was exclusive. They never showed that there was going to be interpreters. They never clearly promoted which spaces were going to have interpreters. So that was feedback that I've given to Matt. We've worked very well together. Lots of ideas on how to make the space accessible. So we had the chill out tents, and I got the feedback from the deaf community, understanding deaf culture, having a deaf space. So I said, why don't we have a deaf space so that we have a space for the deaf to be able to congregate? Because deaf identity is a little bit different to disability, the disabled identity, which is okay. So my suggestion was to have a space for disabled folk, but also a space for deaf folk to be able to come, so that there's perfect lighting so we can see each other. Because we sign, it's a visual language, we need to have appropriate lighting for that. So those little things that are specific to the deaf community that are important to include in this event. So these are things that I've kind of suggested and given feedback on. So it's not just providing an interpreter. There's so much more about being accessible for the deaf community. Meaning that if you then provide those things, more deaf folk will want to come to the event. So then after the festival, I was asking deaf folk, what if we had interpreters at the performances, and if we had a deaf space, would you come to the event? And resounding response was yes. So I'm excited to see next year how many deaf people are going to be coming to the event. Because then it's going to be a true... Because then that will be the true definition of what inclusion means. And then we'll actually be putting into practice, and we'll have the evidence there. So I'm really excited for next year. And for all of you. Am I going okay for time? All right. I just wanted to check. Jump, jump, jump. Yeah, I've spoken about that. Yep, okay. Like what's already been mentioned, include deaf people in the conversation. You need to include them. I include myself because I was proactive. I was like, yep, I'll get in. I believe in you. I'm happy to give you more information if you need, when you're asking for it. So it's important that you ask when you're organising an event, include disabled folk, include deaf folk in your organisation. So that's a really big thing that I've learned when I went to volunteer. It was amazing. Matt did an awesome job. So I'm a little bit in awe of them and their work, and how Meredith said yes, was very open-minded. Yes, 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 yes. I thought that was great. So that's the type of people that we need to be working in those kind of roles, in organising events. So these people can be your role models. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to stop now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stuart. That was amazing. I'm so super conscious of time, so I'm going to skip us straight to some questions. One that's come in from online. Let me just see if I can. Okay, so the question that we have from online is, what advice do you have for small grassroots events? Where do we start? I think just to begin the answer to that question, and I'll pass to whoever wants to answer it from the panel, I think that we've had some of the answer, which is to engage early with the community that you already have. I think the discovery at Chill Out that actually the people who apply to be accessibility volunteers are often people with disability tells you something about the fact that actually there are often disabled people already in your community that you can engage with, and that is probably the best place to start. Did anyone have thoughts that they wanted to offer?
I'm just going to jump in first. I would say that the Easy Read, Easy English, Easy Language program is a really easy way to start. And I say easy in quotes, really. because I'm sure it took a while. But now, you're going to get a copy of the one that we did, so you can get an idea of the sort of stuff that you need to include in it. And I think that's something that you can just copy and paste and put the relevant stuff in that you want for your event. I think that's the main thing that I'd sort of go, that was the most inclusive thing in many ways. I think that for people to be actually able to see what each event was, rather than just assuming. And the feedback that I got was, oh, your program's great, but you've got a lot of colour and you've got a lot of different fonts and all of that sort of stuff, and it makes it really hard for some people to read. So having that easy language version is a good way to start.
I'd echo that definitely, and do a little plug that, the resource that we're creating will have a guide to the kind of what are the lessons we've learned, what kinds of things can you do when you have zero budget, what kinds of things should you do when you have Mardi Gras budget, and all of those things that we've created will be downloadable templates that with guides on what is the kind of information that you need to have in a easy language material. And I think it was a fun, I had fun writing some of those and sending them through to you guys because, it's thinking through a different set of information, not making those assumptions that people will understand. Is it crowded? Will I have a place to sit down? Can I buy food when I'm there? All that kind of logistical information is actually what is the difference between a lot of people with disability envisioning that they're going to have a good time or not. Will there be a chill out zone for me to go and hang out someplace quiet when I'm overloaded? And I think one of the key things we explained to Chill Out when we first approached you, it was a bit of a mutual approach, was people default to thinking about accessibility as where we're going to need budget for more ramps, we're going to need, to make sure we book the interpreters. But what we wanted to impart to you was that there's a whole lot you can do with people power if you start earlier, and that's really I think some of the most
with balancing volunteering or asking people to volunteer, especially when they're disabled themselves, and doing work. Asking people to volunteer, especially when they're disabled themselves, and doing work that deserves to be paid for. Like I work in a neighbourhood house, so the amount of unpaid work I have to do, and we all have to do. How do we balance that with keeping events affordable for everyone? Because if the organisers got paid what they deserved, no one would be able to afford it. If it's affordable, no one gets paid. And I really struggle with the ethics of running activities, events, anything like that. Any advice or any ideas of who I could contact for funding bodies, anything like that? I know we're all in the same boat struggling, but at least if we can help each other, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
I think it's a really good question, and I know that particularly in the event space where we're engaging with creatives, often creative labour is also devalued and insufficiently compensated. So I know that this is an ongoing issue. I do think that there is more recognition that accessibility does require funding from funding bodies now. So I'd encourage people to be writing it into grant applications that might be the kind of baseline funding for an event, because I think that probably as there is greater recognition of the importance of accessibility, that that is actually being factored into some of those grant processes. So that's one thing I'd say. Don't think of it as an add-on necessarily, but actually build it into that budget. The other thing, the changes to the NDIS are likely to be really complicated and hard for a lot of people with disability. We don't know all of the, all the caveats in the world, but also likely. There will be funding that will be made available for organisations to be delivering programs to people with disability. It's kind of a move back to the old block funding. I'm really hoping that in that we see more than people booking a minibus and taking people to bowling, which is kind of a callback to the bad old days, because I think we want access not just to bowling in the middle of the day, but actually to the events that are of our communities of choice. So I'm hoping that when that grant round at some point comes round, that organisations will look at that funding and will consider how they can build that into their budget. Ooh. Hold on one sec. I will come to you in a second. I just wanted to make sure, did you want to say something about that, Matt? Okay. Sam's going to run you down a mic.
Firstly, I want to say thank you to all of the amazing wealth of knowledge that you're sharing. What I heard from you was a really great case study of an LGBTIQ+ event, and I was wondering, was there any particular learnings that you had to share about the intersection of LGBTIQ+ and people with disabilities in non-LGBTIQ+. So thinking less about the accessibility and more about safety and inclusion aspects in other spaces to make them safe, accessible, inclusive, and maybe even belonging.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're hyper aware of. Part of, as I said, the approach to our program was recognizing that there's an entire NDIS system and lots of other disability support systems that are supposed to be supporting disability better, but they're doing terrible on the LGBTIQA+ stuff generally. And thankfully what we found was, well, sadly we found what we expected, resistance over there to acknowledge sexuality in general, let alone diverse sexualities and genders. In the LGBTIQA+ space, what we found was such a rich history of intersectionality and, you know, meeting community need on the smell of an oily rag. That's how, you know, our community-controlled services exist in spite of the system, because we know that the community needs us. There's a huge amount of willingness there, and so we were able to pilot test a lot of things in those environments because Chill Out was like, hell yeah, we'll work with you on that. But the guide's being written in order to, you know, be multifaceted. To try to answer a few things that are practical in your response, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on LGBTIQ inclusive practice and affirmation in general. So, you know, the Rainbow Tick is the most robust evidence-based framework for understanding how that sort of thing operates in a systems way in order to feed down into a practice level. But part of one of the strategies that we did in thinking through that was a little deck of cards that volunteers had that was laminated, and there was information, a little quick sheet of, oh, I'm seeing someone approaching with a guide dog. You know, what are the key things that I might want to offer that person, you know, so that they know what kind of things we can supply. And similarly, we had drafted, but we ended up pulling them out because they weren't entirely necessary, a whole section of those on LGBTIQ inclusion. So, you know, always direct everybody to all the toilet options. Don't just say, oh, you look women-shaped, so I'm going to show you where the women toilets are. You know, within that, there's also, yeah, so much more that I can't explain. It is a simple amount of time, but the intersection of both disability and LGBTIQ identities is particularly important in neurodiversity and autism, because we have such a high population in that space. So I'd say that one of our that our Chill Out zones served a dual purpose in a lot of ways, and we'd encourage those in all event spaces and make sure that they have you know, clear signage that also says they're gender welcoming places, because that's a high correlation in that double population.
I think the other thing that I would say about the disability sector does have a lot of work to do in relation to LGBTIQA+ inclusion. Inclusive Rainbow Voices, the organisation that I work for, is doing a bunch of that work at a systemic advocacy level. And I know that's not the same as like educating people now on how to be more inclusive of a diversity of sexual gender and other experiences. But I think it is really key that spaces like the NDIA are actually looking more systematically at LGBTIQA plus inclusion, because it's from that it will filter down. So if we can see it more clearly represented in people's plans that they need to be able to access their communities of choice, then disability service providers will have to work out how it is that they can do that work, and that's going to require a level of education. So that's my vaguely political response to that question.
My brain doesn't catch up, so I have one more practical thing for them. I think the same principle applies around consultation and lived experience involvement ahead of the time, and then providing the information. What's really similar in the experience that Stuart described is that trans people, queer people in general, but particularly transgender diverse people, are going to assume that unless the event clearly tells me they understand my needs and have done things about it, that it's not going to be a safe place. We live with a filter of it's shit-colored goggles to keep ourselves safe, and we default to, if we haven't seen green lights, amber lights aren't something you speed through, you stop. So similarly, I would say involve lived experience early, create those strategies, and then communicate them as part of the promotion so that people know what it is that you're providing. That's the most practical thing I can say.
I'm sort of conscious that we probably need to give everyone a break. We did set aside a little bit more time to have more of a conversation after I've given all these people a chance to have a drink and find a toilet and all of those practical things. So we might take a break for 5 minutes and then come back. I've taken note of there were 2 hands. I will go to you guys first when we come back, but I just want to make sure that we're taking care of our presenters. Thank you all, and people who are online, thank you so much for joining us. I know that we've gone well over time, which probably speaks to the amount that there is to talk about on this topic. The people online will probably not, I think, be able to access the second part of this. This will be in the room conversation only, but we'll come back in about 10 minutes, if that works for everyone. And thank you to our extraordinary presenters. We might just give them a little round of applause just now.